So, Valtteri Bottas steals his second win of the season after Lewis Hamilton was penalised yet again. Welcome back to the Grid Talk podcast. Today we will be reviewing the most exciting race on the calendar, the Russian GP. Hosting for the first time is me, Steph Wentworth, from All About SteF1 on YouTube. Joining me is engineering student Owain Medford.
Hello.
F1 expert Alex Booth.
Hello.
And sports journalist Mikael Kataja.
Hi.
Right, we are broadcasting this show live on Facebook, so like the Chronicle on Facebook to see the shows as they air. Right, so the Russian GP and our winner, Valtteri Bottas, what are we thinking about that? How do we think his race goes? How do we think his race went? We'll start with you, Alex. What are you thinking?
Well, I think he did everything he had to do. I mean, he got a decent start and he almost took the lead in the first corner. And then the safety car came out. But even before the race started, there was controversy because Lewis Hamilton was under investigation for the practice start at the end of the pit lane. I mean, the rules are the rules. You know, it's not really Hamilton's fault. It's more Mercedes' fault because they deemed that it was okay for him to do that. And there were two violations as well, and that resulted in 2 5-second penalties. You could look at it in the sense that Bottas finished over 10 seconds ahead of Lewis. So if it had been a 10-second penalty added to his race time, he wouldn't have won. But having said that, his mentality would have been different. He clearly was affected by the penalty decision. I'm not overly happy about the way that Lewis conducted himself afterwards, saying that the stewards were trying to stop him from winning. I don't think that's the right attitude to portray, but it happens to all of them. It certainly means that the critics can't label it that, you know, that Lewis doesn't get affected like anyone else does, because he clearly does. He's got 2 penalties in one race. So I don't know what the haters can say about that. But going back to Bottas, it might be a confidence boost for him, but realistically, it was an open goal after Lewis's penalty, and we can't really get away from that. But having said that, you know, we couldn't really ask much more from him. You know, he drove a very mature race, didn't make any mistakes, brought the maximum points home.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a really good point that it was an open goal kind of win. Hopefully it'll be a confidence boost. We don't know if it's going to change anything in the championship, but yeah, nice to see someone else standing on the top step of the podium. It would have been nice to see the second place driver, Max Verstappen, stand back on the top step of the podium. So, Owain, what do you think about Max's performance in second place?
I think he did pretty well to sort of take it above. He did it actually well. Okay, he bounced back initially at the start of the race because obviously he was under pressure from Ocon and Ricciardo and also Perez at times. So to get back into third very, very quickly, you know, not have that issue with having to deal with Jenny traffic or any slower cars that might have impeded his progress a little bit, that was pretty, you know, that was good for him. As it sort of went towards the later stages of the race, obviously he's got that free position off Hamilton, so that kind of worked out well for him. You know, put him up into second place if we see him a lot. I think, to be honest, the being on the same strategy as Bottas and Bottas not having the same sort of soft tyre degradation that you'd have expected to see off the soft tyre runners, I think that kind of meant that because he was obviously in the same sort of rhythm as Valtteri, obviously with the speed of the Mercedes, I don't think there's any real chance that he's actually going to get first place without you know, some kind of safety car or some kind of weirder situation later in the race. So I think it's obviously good, and I don't criticize him too much for not making it any further, because when you're up against that Mercedes on the same strategy, I don't think it's, you know, you need a mistake for them to be able to fall into your clutches.
Yeah, definitely. And the guy behind Max definitely made a mistake, or rather the team made the mistake. So Lewis Hamilton in third. Mikael, what are we thinking about his race? And we can touch on what Alex said as well about his conduct after.
Obviously, his start was good. We can start off with that. It's difficult in Sochi to keep the first place when you start on pole. So he did well to leave. Of course, the softer tire helped him, but it was a good effort from him. I mean, when it comes to the penalties, as Alex already said, I mean, rules are rules, and the team definitely made a mistake there. And yeah, after going to the pits and being dropped to, like, I think 10th, he came out ahead of Kimi at the time. Yeah, I mean, it was a mediocre race. He got third, which is, you know, least you could have hoped for at that stage. But yeah, it was a hit and a miss this weekend. The conduct, I mean, it's kind of how Lewis is when he doesn't, you know, when he's kind of his lead is taken from him, in the sense. So I'm not surprised. Of course, it's a bit disappointing, but I mean, I won't doubt that he'll bounce back when we go to Nürburgring.
100%. I think the conduct thing is a little bit difficult to say. I mean, obviously it's his second and third penalty, technically, because there was 2 penalties in 2 races, but both of them kind of weren't really his fault. They were the fault of the team, I'd say. So I can kind of understand where he is becoming frustrated, because it seems like he's getting a whole host of bad luck. But yeah, it is the way that Lewis kind of normally acts when things don't go his way. I do think he could have been on for a race victory, and I think a lot of people think, like you said as well, Alex, about how he was over 10 seconds behind Bottas, so technically he wouldn't have won the race anyway. But I just think if he was out in front, he would have been able to kind of control the race as he normally does. And I don't know, something about Lewis, he just has the edge over Bottas. And even though Bottas was really, really strong today and looks strong in Russia countless times, I don't know, we'll never know. It will always be a bit of a what if question. So moving on to 4th place, Alex, we had Sergio Perez, who actually had a really, really quiet race, and we didn't see much of him at all. What did you make of his race?
Well, he had a very strong race to finish 4th, which is the best that he could really hope for, because the top 3 are in a class of their own with the 2 Mercedes and Max Verstappen. I think it's showing Racing Point a little bit what they're missing, because with the announcement that Perez has been booted out of the team for next season, with Vettel taking his place. Of course, his teammate it was a very brief race, but Lance Stroll. So Perez again, in a similar case to Bottas, he did the absolute best he could do, and it paid off dividends.
Yeah, totally agree. Really strong race, quiet race, but yeah, good job. He's picking up the points. So, okay, 5th place, and we had Daniel Ricciardo. Owain, what are we thinking about his race? He did pick up a penalty after the overtake on Ocon in turn 2, as a lot of drivers picked up throughout this race. So what did you make of Ricciardo today?
I think he did a good job. Obviously, he'd wanted to take the fight to Sergio Perez, but obviously the penalty kind of will have stopped that, or made it significantly more difficult. He's obviously got 5 seconds to make up just to keep that place. I think Ocon, I think he was a bit unlucky, and to be honest with you, I don't agree with how the stewards have been ruling with the turn 2, turn 2 rejoining on the inside of turn 3. I think for most drivers, ending up on that sausage curb, I don't think they policed it in the way that I think is particularly fair. So it's to deal with that and still end up ahead of your teammate and show yourself as very, very racy after being swapped around and putting yourself up a number of positions and still maintaining your starting position. I think that's good for him. That's a good performance. He should be happy with that, I think. And it's showing why McLaren are coming in for next year.
Definitely. What are the rest of your thoughts on the policing of the turn 2? Because I like it, because the stewards seem to be being consistent. So we had consistency throughout the race, and whoever kind of violated the rules, so to speak, they picked up a penalty. So what are you guys thinking? Do you think that there should have been another penalty or another consequence for the drivers that ended up kind of violating or breaching the rules on those sausage curbs?
I don't understand why they said that they allowed them to get away with it in qualifying, but they said in the race they would be a lot more strict on it. Surely in qualifying it'd be more, because time's crucial, and you're going to gain extra seconds. And, if you've breached track limits in qualifying, then that's surely a big no-no. And I don't understand why they'd let them get away with it there and not in the race. That just baffles me. But it's the same for everybody.
Yeah, I mean,
Kyle?
I'd agree with that. It's a bit weird also, because I feel they made it even faster from last year. Like, I mean, we saw it with Sainz going way too fast, trying to get through that like penalty area and just smashing himself on the wall. But I also think that, I mean, it's good that they're taking care of them again. I would say just like put a gravel trap there and no one's gonna go wide. So there are different solutions to this. I think it's fine. I think it was a bit weird, and I think Owain, did you bring this up in the chat during the race? But the fact that Grosjean didn't get a penalty, even though he just blasted through those like guide posts.
I didn't know if you had any more to say.
Yeah, but anyway, like in general, it's good that they're doing something at least to keep the drivers on track. But yeah, just put a gravel trap there.
Gravel traps. Everyone loves a gravel trap. I think we all really appreciated those in Mugello a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, hashtag bring back the gravel. Okay, 6th place, we had Charles Leclerc, who was running in the podium positions for quite a while. So Mikael, what are we thinking about his race? Because he actually did a good job to put his Ferrari where it ended up.
Yeah, I mean, starting from 10th because of Albon's gearbox penalty, getting up to 6th, it was a good effort for him. He did well in the start to kind of pick up positions, and the only real mistake he made, and it didn't really cost anything to him, it cost more to Stroll, but the fact that he bumped Stroll's back wheel in turn 4. But yeah, solid result again for Leclerc, and I mean, comparing his result to Vettel, yeah, that's all you need to say.
Yeah, definitely a big difference between the Ferraris at the minute. Esteban Ocon, I actually thought he did a pretty decent race. I mean, there were some questionable bits that happened, but Alex, what did you make of his race? Because he was running ahead of his teammate for a big portion of it.
He was, and then the call came through. They had to let him by, and he was going very slow towards the inside of turn 2, and then that was when the Ricciardo ran over the curve as we were talking about just then, and then got the penalty. No driver likes being told to let the teammate through, and no doubt that will have affected his performance greatly. He brought some points home for the team because Ocon's had he's had his fair share of bad luck this season, and it's nice that he gets some points on the board. And then Renault a double point finish in what has been a fairly decent season for them compared to because last year they weren't particularly solid. Then it shows that the signs are good, and if they carry on, then they could really be challenging McLaren and Racing Point for that third place in the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, definitely. So Renault at the beginning of the season weren't really looking to be in the top midfield fight with those cars, but in the last few races they've really kind of pulled it back and began to challenge the McLarens and the Racing Point. So it will be interesting to see kind of where that ends up with the constructors fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing that in the next couple of races. So in 8th, Owain, we had Danny Kvyat, the home hero, who also was running in the podium positions for a large portion of the race as he started on the hard tyres. So what did we think of his race?
It's a good race for him. He's made up a good number of positions, and he's beaten his teammate, and he's brought home a good points finish. I was kind of hoping he'd hold up Verstappen a little bit more than he did, but unfortunately, he didn't. Probably quite wisely. It was good to see. He had pace, and he was looking actually quite racy. I thought he might be able to take it a little bit more. He wasn't far off Ocon at the end, and I thought maybe you should. It's a difficult place to overtake, and discretion is probably the better part of valor there to try and send it into what is it? It's like 15. It's off camber. It's a 90-degree corner. I respect his decision to give it a little look, but unfortunately it didn't. He didn't gain out of Ocon onto the final straight, which is a shame for him. But other than that, I think he's really showing. They've got a good set of drivers in AlphaTauri, and the fact that both of them can show what they can do, and they're still quite racy is good for them.
Yeah, Danny Kvyat definitely has a lot to prove in comparison to Pierre Gasly at the minute, but beating his teammate is a start. In 9th place was his teammate. So, Mikael, what did we think about Gasly's race?
He had a good race, good first half of the race at least. I mean, of course, starting with the soft tire isn't easy, and he was kind of the back of the line with the cars in front of him having the soft tire. But yeah, I mean, he was doing well on 8th, and then you had that virtual safety car for a moment when the marshals went and fixed those guideposts in turn 2, and I mean, AlphaTauri decided to pit him. Whether they decided to pit him just because they thought it's going to last longer or if he was out of tires. He didn't really, I mean, the team didn't lose any points. Gasly lost 1 position to Kvyat, so it was an okay race for him. Definitely his Saturday was better than Sunday, I would say. He was really able to make a name for himself there, but still not a bad result. 2 more points.
Yeah, exactly. Not bad, but not his best. Okay, and stealing the last points position, we had Alex Albon, who was demoted for a gearbox change as well. So he didn't start in P10 for quali, he started P15 and then obviously had to make his way through the pack. And he ended up finishing 10th after picking up a penalty at the very end, just like everyone else who went off on the sausage curves on turn 2. So, Alex, what did you think about Albon? Alex Albon.
Yeah, if there's ever an image of a man under pressure, I think it's Alex Albon, because I mean he did have that fantastic podium in Mugello, but it was kind of back to normality. I hate to use that phrase to describe him, but it was. I mean, he was soundly trounced by Max Verstappen this weekend, still in qualifying, and starting 15th is always going to be difficult. He showed some gritty driving, which is we know that he's capable of doing. But at this stage in the season, that I think we're 10 races in, there's about 7 left. He really needs to start delivering better results. Otherwise, I think Dr. Helmut Marko will be on the phone, whatever he wants to do to negotiate that matter. I mean, yeah, I think he's really struggling, and he got the final point. But should the second Red Bull be battling for position 10? I don't think it should. Clearly, Max Verstappen is a great talent, and being a teammate to him is a very daunting task. And it's similar to Bottas with Hamilton, really. But it depends how you're able to cope with that pressure. And it looks like Alex it clearly affects him, and he needs to get the better of that.
Yeah,
he's picking up the points wherever, but they're only the single-digit points, and that's clearly not what Christian Horner expects or what Helmut Marko expects.
Yeah, I think the thing with Alex is I was really hoping that he was going to kind of use his podium from Mugello as a springboard to better things and to better results throughout the rest of the season. And it just seems like it was a one-off because he's slipped right down again. I think his main problem was definitely his qualifyings, and that's where his problem this weekend started, because you can't qualify P10 when your teammate is qualifying P2. You can't. That's too far. He's too far away, and that's the disappointing thing from Alexander Albon. So if he can sort out his qualifying, he'll set himself up better in the race. So fingers crossed that he can turn that around for the next race. Right, so just missing out on the points positions, we had Antonio Giovinazzi, who always seems to make up thousands of positions on the opening lap. And he actually was there or thereabouts fighting with all of the rest of the Ferrari-powered cars. He had a really good fight with Vettel at one point. So, Owain, what did we think about Gio's race this week?
Yeah, he's getting a good 6 positions. And the fact that he is he the leading? I think he's the leading Ferrari car, which is says a lot.
From Leclerc.
Apart from Leclerc, but Leclerc's Leclerc. Apart from the works Ferrari, yeah, he's the fastest. So yeah, that's good. That's good for Antonio Giovinazzi, because he's beaten Raikkonen by a fairly solid margin there, and the fact that he's keeping Magnussen behind in another Ferrari powered car is also good. Nice clean race, didn't get in any trouble when he could have done at the start, starting where he was, and the fact that he's sort of come out in a really good position. He'd only been one or someone having an issue away from the points, which is always good, and that's going to make him look good, and that should actually hopefully help firm up the grasp he's got on his seat for next year, with obviously the threat of Eilert or maybe Schumacher.
Yeah, he definitely needs to be pulling out some good performances, and this is good. Maybe better than he has been performing. So, but in 12th place, we had Kevin Magnussen, who was running in the points for a bit of the race. Mikael, what did we think about him? What did we think about the Haas?
Well, actually, both Haas's had a pretty decent start. They were able to avoid the carnage that Sainz and Stroll created, and were both in the top 10 or near to it. So it was a good race, at least for Magnussen in his parts. Obviously, points in that Haas, just as in an Alfa Romeo, are very difficult to get if you don't have more than a couple of retirements. So it was a decent result for him. Again, yeah, nothing much else to say with Haas. Probably going out or losing his seat after this year as well as with Grosjean. So just
yeah. It's a similar story with Haas every week. I do think they did perform quite well this weekend. But moving on, we had the other works Ferrari in 13th, the same place where he is in the championship, I think. So yeah, we have Sebastian Vettel. It's not good, is it, when his teammate is finishing in 6th and he's all the way down in 13th?
I don't think he should be really fighting with Kimi Raikkonen in a works Ferrari when his teammate's finishing 6th. He's over. Yeah. I mean, are we glad to be going somewhere else? No, he should at least be in the same place with his teammate, or within. He should be getting in the points at least. I mean, there's just not. It's just not on. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's not what you expect to see out of a 4-time world champion, is it? Being that far down, being in sort of a pack of Ferrari powered cars that are underpowered, quite literally this season. But he should at least be at the head of that pack. It's not even getting the potential of the car, which is saying something, really. He's been put to shame by Raikkonen, who's sort of on the way out, really, you'd think. So it's not a good weekend, but to be honest, it never is.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit difficult to defend Vettel as well because Leclerc is doing such a good job of putting his Ferrari right up there in places where it probably shouldn't be, and he's just outperforming Vettel a lot. So yeah, he will be glad to be on the way out of Ferrari. Okay, Alex, we'll come back to you for the next one, Raikkonen. So he was fighting with Vettel for a large portion of the race. He was fighting with the rest of the Ferrari-powered cars, but again, a quiet one, not really fighting for any important positions, shall we say.
Well, not that Kimi will care because he doesn't really have that kind of attitude. But from the outside, I think it's a little bit disappointing that he was beaten by Giovinazzi today, which is kind of what you can really hope for with Alfa Romeo. I mean, they're not really in the position to challenge for points. So the best thing that one of their drivers can do is beat the other. And Giovinazzi had the edge on Raikkonen today. Although Raikkonen, to his credit, it was great to see him fighting with Sebastian Vettel, which, as Owain just mentioned, is not really a position where the Ferrari should be, scrapping with the custom Ferrari team. It was another consistent, I suppose, performance from Raikkonen, another finish in what is his record equaling 322nd start, which is an amazing achievement. Again, not that he'll really care so much, but for me, it's nice to see.
Yes, definitely. I hope Raikkonen will be on his... I don't know if I want to see him stay and kind of smash the record or make way for new talent. So I'm a bit on edge, a bit on the fence. I don't really know what I want from Raikkonen. 15th, Lando Norris. Now, I was really disappointed with Lando's race. I just think he was really unlucky at the beginning. Mikael, what did we think about this?
Yeah, I mean, he really suffered with Carlos's retirement. So yeah, just unlucky there. He had a decent start again. I think it was pretty much on the position that he started off with going to turn 2, but yeah, then it just all went wrong there. I mean, it was entertaining seeing him fighting with Russell and Albon after they all had pitted. Of course, not nearly where they would want to be fighting, but at least it was entertaining. But yeah, it probably, well, definitely the worst weekend for McLaren in this year, having one car totaled and another 15th.
Yeah, not an ideal result for them, and it's allowed Racing Point and Renault to kind of catch up to them in the constructors because they were the only constructors that was over constructors from the midfield, shall I say, that was over 100 points. So that gap between them and Racing Point and Renault has really closed up this weekend because McLaren obviously didn't take home any points. 16th, Nicholas Latifi. Alex, what did we think about that? Because he made up quite a few places on the opening laps again, and he has beat George Russell on track again.
Well, that's no mean feat, really, because we've said previous times on the podcast how highly rated George Russell is. So for Nicholas Latifi to beat him and convincingly as well is a very good result for him. And Williams didn't seem as, I mean, obviously Williams are the, I don't want to use the word slowest because none of the cars are exactly slow, but they are the team that is most likely to be at the back of the grid. And they weren't really as close to the midfield pack as they have been in previous races, I didn't think. Certainly not on pure speed. And Russell, of course, made that late pit stop. But Latifi, a solid performance, and it's good for his confidence, I suppose, and no doubt beating Russell as I just mentioned. It's sad. It's sad that Williams just don't seem to be able to. What they did in comparison to last year was brilliant. They're clearly not as, the deficit's not so big, but they just need that. They almost got it with Russell and Mugello. They need that lucky break where a lot of drivers have been able to finish towards the front, and without that, they're not going to get any points on the board. And that's the harsh world of Formula One, unfortunately.
Yeah, a very, very harsh world. But another harsh world for Romain Grosjean, who is in 17th. He just doesn't seem to catch a break, does he? Still getting beaten by his teammate. Owain, what are we thinking about Grosjean?
I think he got quite sort of badly negatively affected by having obviously going over the curb at turn 2, as a number of drivers did. And but I do credit him with going sort of malicious compliance because it kind of showed up, for me at least, the ridiculousness of those rules, which I'd really like to get into a bit more later. But yeah, he didn't get a penalty for that, which sort of, that's good for him, obviously. But the time that he lost going through there, and obviously there's potential for damage by hitting polystyrene cones at polystyrene boards at sort of 140 miles an hour or something like that. That's not going to, that might take away some of your confidence. And he lost a couple of positions from there, I seem to remember. But up until then, it wasn't a terrible drive. He'd stayed out of trouble and wasn't really sort of causing negative attention to himself, which I think is the best you can sort of say for the Hasses at this point. Unless they're knocking it out of the park and getting 7th or 8th, not getting into trouble is good for them. I think that's what they need, because on occasion they will capitalise on that, but unfortunately they just haven't this weekend, just the nature of the race.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of summarising the Haas. They just need to be able to capitalise, but this wasn't one of the weekends that they were able to do so. Our last finisher in 18th, we had George Russell. Now, I'm not really sure what was going on with George Russell. I don't know how he had the audacity. Williams had the audacity to bring him in to try and steal the fastest lap away from a Mercedes car. So, Mikael, what were we thinking about George's race?
I mean, obviously it went wrong from the start already, having to pit on the first lap with the rest of the Twitch streamers. But he was doing fine, overtaking Albon there, but then he had that massive lockup into turn 13, which basically just forced him to waste that one set of hard tires. Not that it would have probably lasted him to the end anyways, but that forced him to have one more extra pit stop, putting him where he is. But yeah, again, like same thing as I said with Gasly, but maybe even more powerfully for Russell. Saturday, amazing. Sunday, a bit of an off race for him. But yeah, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, onwards and upwards. A little bit disappointing to see him finishing last, because I don't think that's where any of us expect George Russell to be, especially in comparison with Roman Grosjean, who finished in front of him. So yeah, a little bit disappointing, but yeah, we move. Okay, so finally we've got our 2 DNFs who both DNF'd the race on the first lap. So obviously Sainz clipped the wall as he was going through that escape road thing from the turn 2 thing. I don't know how to explain that. And then Stroll was clipped at the back by Charles Leclerc and ended up kind of spinning and hitting the wall. So what did we think about our 2 retirements? Anyone jump in? Or no one jump in?
I was going to say, just wait politely so we don't talk over each other. I was going to say Sainz, I think, he knows what he's done wrong there. You sort of, it was the kind of onboard that made you wince when you saw it afterwards, and you thought, oh, wow. I mean, we saw people struggling to go through there, fairly slowly. And when the pundits are saying, well, we took a bike rider and it does, it is tighter than you think. I don't think that was really on. I think it was just maybe a little bit of frustration for being put out there. And unfortunately, it's really taken him out of the race and caused an issue for him. So yeah, he knows what he's done wrong. Unfortunately, it's taken him out of the race. It's denied McLaren some strategy options and a points to get a chance to get any points. But I'd expect. We don't know what would happen. We don't know how if he'd follow sort of Russell's performance. Typically, he's a little bit better. Not Russell, sorry, Norris. He's typically a little bit better than Lando, but not much better. So he might have got points, but apart from that, yeah, it's not too bad. He's like I say, he knows what he's done wrong.
Right. Anyone else jumping in with any opinions?
A major setback for Racing Point and Lance Stroll, the second consecutive retirement. They would have been hoping for a decent haul of points, considering where they qualified. Obviously it was not at fault. It was just a typical racing incident. 2 and 2 and won't go, and sadly for Stroll, he ended up losing more than Leclerc did. But again, it's another case for Racing Point. I mean, what could have been? I mean, they've clearly got a very competitive package, but come Sunday, they're not able to really bring what they expected. But that's another race down. We go on to the next one for them.
Definitely. Yeah. Anything to add?
No, just also because I think Stroll was the only Racing Point car that got some aero updates to Sochi.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that they didn't get the data for them through an entire Grand Prix or an entire race. Yeah, just unlucky for the team as well and for Stroll. So yeah, too bad.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as well, because I think if Stroll's package was competitive and the new upgrades were successful, then he could even have been challenging for potentially a podium position, because the Racing Points could have tried to change their strategy in order to kind of displace Lewis Hamilton off the podium after kind of his penalty. So it's definitely a lost opportunity, because I think the Racing Point could have definitely been able to challenge for a podium. Even if they weren't able to follow through, I definitely think that they would have had the opportunity to be in that fight right at the front. As we saw, Sergio Perez was not too far behind Lewis Hamilton, 10 something seconds. I can't remember.
Yeah.
8 seconds. See, that's not a lot. And I do think that if the upgrade package would have been successful, that Stroll might have been able to put himself in that fight and put himself in the mix. So that's disappointing, and another case of what could have been. But I'm going to ask you guys final question. So who is your driver of the day? I'm not going to say mine because I feel like somebody's going to want to take mine. But why don't you start, Alex?
I'm going to go with Daniel Ricciardo, actually, because he recovered well from the setback with the 5-second penalty and still had a decent finish. And it was a great drive by him. And it was a really strong performance from the Ricciardo that we all know can deliver that sort of performance.
Owain?
I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc because he's yet again shown that he's consistently outperforming that car by such a wide margin. It's almost ridiculous. I mean, he's actually putting in fairly solid points finishes for Ferrari.
Mikael?
Yeah, I'll go with Bottas. Strong weekend, strong race. Again, proving that when it comes to these kind of more city circuit 90-degree turns like Sochi or Abu Dhabi or Baku, he's got the performance there compared to maybe some other places like Catalonia. But yeah, he did a solid job, kept Verstappen at bay. There are what ifs with Hamilton, but he comes out with 26 points, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, pretty good weekend. Okay, so no one said who I was going to say. I was going to say Sergio Perez just because he did such a strong performance. I think it's really difficult this weekend, actually, because I don't think anyone necessarily had a flawless performance. And I think the driver of the day vote was, normally we can see like 30% for the driver of the day, but it was only 13. And it was very, very much evenly distributed throughout all of the drivers, because I think there were good performances kind of all the way through the field, even in guys that didn't even pick up any points. So I think, yeah, driver of the day is not a super obvious one this week. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us. If you want to check out some of the other podcasts that we've done, we have a bank of over 60 episodes to sink your teeth into. We're available on Amazon Music as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Omni Studio and Pocket Casts. Just search for F1 Grid Talk. We'll be back next Sunday to preview the Eiffel GP, but thank you all so much for watching and listening, and bye for now.